Oh, what a historic non-conference stretch we have had. And folks, we welcome you into conference play. This is another episode of Six Rotations alongside Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman. Happy to be with you all. And Mick, we don't need to waste any time this time. We can jump right into the fun and go back in time a little bit. And let's start with Tuesday. We can spend about half of this episode talking about Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. It was an all-time pre-conference midweek slate. And before we get to the top five of the AVCA coaches poll, Nick, the decision from the coaches this week, not easy because we start on Tuesday and there were almost 1,000 service errors as Stanford were able to squeak it out against Nebraska and Lincoln.
What a match. I loved it. I got to see all these matches, Daniel. What a week.
5 main matches, we can say it, right? 5 marquee matches in the last week.
Absolutely.
The home team lost all 5 of them. That's incredible.
That's a good call. I didn't pick up on that.
So we start with Nebraska. Let's take a look at what the Huskers bring to the table, because in this match on Tuesday, it looked like Nebraska was going to be the dominant team early. Stanford didn't necessarily aggress themselves in the first set. They came back to win the second, and then those extra points in the fourth. When you have 24 service errors and you win a match, Mick, what's the conversation like, especially when you have someone like Kendall Kipp?
Yeah, I think that both teams were going for it, and that's why you have those errors, and they didn't let up. But early that happens, and I thought Stanford grew up in this match.
It's a situation where if you're Stanford, it's your highest attacking errors of the season. It's your highest serving errors of the season. And you go into Lincoln and you have to give all the credit to the grit of the Huskers, right? Nicklin Hames gets hurt, comes back in. That back injury looks gnarly. Obviously, she missed the second half of their major slate when Nebraska was able to go down to Lexington and sweep the Wildcats in a very dominant effort without Hames. But how about the digs that Nicklin were able to make late in that match? And yet Kendall Kipp, Sammy Francis, Cammie Minor, they all looked just a little bit better than Nebraska there at the end of it. But we move on, right? Tuesday had a couple big blowouts. Florida swept Florida State. Western Kentucky swept Tennessee. Marquette looked good. They had a great weekend. Maybe it was the Golden Eagles weekend of celebrating. And then Wednesday night. And how about this? Just the 4th regular season match on ESPN. It was a fantastic battle for the Bluegrass. What was your biggest takeaway of the Emma Grom versus Raquel Lazaro, I think is her name. What was your takeaway there?
Lazaro, I think, but Lazaro is maybe right. But I like Grom. I think Lazaro's done a great job, though. She's not been Dilfer, but she's been very consistent. And so I think that's a good get for Louisville. But I think that match, every player needed a towel. And, Kentucky has come out and said they're going to air condition that facility, but it was so hot in there. They spent so many minutes wiping up the floor. There were a lot of timeouts.
Have you been down there? Because it can get freezing in December. I've been for a tournament, and it can get boiling in September. And the broadcasters were talking about it as well. It was a great broadcast too. Fantastic job. Eric Freed, Katie George, the face of ESPN in volleyball, is looking strong.
Yeah, and the teams weathered it. They drew that match out to the 5th set. It was really great the way they did it. But Louisville's the best team. There's no question in my mind, and they were able to overcome there. So good for Louisville on Wednesday. On to the next good one.
Well, first off, Louisville, they didn't get a good break, right? That point on 8-7 in the 5th set, and you looked like Danny Busboom Kelly was going to break her heel, trying to go back and forth and stomping away. And you can almost hear it on the broadcast, the bench over there stomping. And then a great point at 14-10. But Louisville, for the second year in a row, beats Kentucky. They haven't done that, Nick, since 2009. And you know what? This is a good time. Why don't we pop up our top 5 right here? Because we talked about Nebraska. We've talked about Louisville. In your opinion, do you see the Cardinals having done enough to jump over Nebraska? How about Stanford climbing into the top 5 as well with the win over Big Red? And then San Diego quietly sweeping UCLA, grabbing that 4 spot for their best ranking ever.
Yeah, I like the top 5. We have Texas 1. I have Louisville 2. I agree with those. I had Nebraska out of the top 5, quite honestly, just because of the scheduling and that with they gave San Diego 4, and I appreciate that, but I think San Diego is 7 simply because there's some other teams better. And I like Stanford moving into the top 4. You know, they're one of 3 teams that scheduled 6 ranked teams this year.
Wow.
And they really have played the schedule. They earned that spot. But 5 is okay. 4, that's pretty good. I had them at 3 actually, and I had San Diego at 7.
Well, Louisville got 1 first place vote. Texas got the other 63. They did drop a set though. So all those gamblers that want to wager on how many sets Texas is going to fall to, they lost the first set against Houston at home this weekend. A huge one in Lawrence on Wednesday this week. Kansas hosting Texas, the first Big 12 match of the season, and it's a dandy. However, Kansas didn't necessarily have the best of weekends. It was a great showing on the other side of things in the UCF-Kansas battle. Omaha as well were thrown into things. Omaha went 5 sets against UCF. We'll talk about the Golden Knights in just a minute. What about on Thursday? 2 top 5 teams go down on Thursday as we take a look at our 6 through 10. Minnesota stays there in the top 10. Georgia Tech, though, nowhere to be seen in the top 10. They fell on Thursday night.
Georgia Tech's schedule is why they're down. It's not that they're not a good team, but Arkansas got them and got them very good. I mean, that's just a tail kicking right there. And that shows you that Arkansas's wins over Washington, when they split with Washington to start the season, are pretty good. I would have liked to seen Arkansas have a little tougher schedule, but that was really a nice match. And then the Pepperdine, Minnesota match. What a match that was. Unbelievable.
Mick, how good are the Waves? How in sync is Scott Wong's crew right now? We're going to have a segment in a little bit where we have our top 5 teams in the West, maybe some teams that are struggling a bit, but Pepperdine, no. The most dominant set that I have seen a team play on the road in a big match this season, Mick, was that epic one-sided third set in Minnesota. And obviously, we all know when the match is tied 1-1, that third set couldn't be more important. Minnesota switched Jenna Wenis to the right side. Wooker played her first game, so there's still a bright future for the Golden Gophers. They're sitting at 8. Ohio State at 7. Now, that was an interesting one as Pittsburgh decimated them, and Pitt needed it after falling to Towson last week. You know, a couple numbers here. Courtney Bazzario from Iowa, 15 kills, hitting .412 with 1 error in that match. But in my opinion, the Panthers are going to ride and fall behind Vasquez Gomez. Valeria Vasquez Gomez is a bit of that rising tide, right? The X factor in that match. Pittsburgh sits at 10. Penn State still undefeated. How about them sitting 11-0, moving up from 11 to 9?
Yeah, they're going to get tested in the Big Ten, and we'll find out if they're for real. But they have wins this year over Stanford and Oregon, and that was early. But those are 2 good wins for a newly coached team, and I think we'll find out where Penn State is in the next 2 weeks.
Well, Wisconsin sits at 6. The Badgers drop from 4 to 6. They drop the epic match. And let's look right now at 10 through 15 because we want to talk about the Gators. 16,833, Mick. It was all Gators. They jumped out to a 2-0 lead. When you watch that match, what was your biggest takeaway? Was it the comeback? It was 19-13 in the third, or was it the resilience of Markova and McKissick and company making it a little bit of a scare turned into still a dominant win in 5?
For me, it was freshman Alexis Stuckey, the setter for Florida, made all the difference in the world. And she made a freshman error that made that match go to 5 games. She tried to dump the match point in the third set, only to have it stuffed. And setters, you don't want to take the ball out of the hitter's hands when you get in those situations. But that young setter for Florida is good. 6'2" out of, I believe, Wyoming or Montana.
Wyoming, yeah, right out of Laramie. Mother is a legend. I actually was lucky enough to broadcast 2 matches last year in Wyoming for the Mountain West Network, and they grabbed a color analyst that was a high schooler. I didn't know who she was. Her name was Alexis Stuckey. Red hair, confident, swagger. The broadcasters were right on it, right? Anne-Marie and Emily, they called out her swagger. They called out the way that she carried herself. I really think that the Gators have started to find themselves. They always seem to have that spot early in non-conference play where Mary Wise is still working towards it. And maybe that was the loss to Stanford at home. Now you come back, you win it on an out-of-system free ball that was then blocked. It's not easy to do.
I liked Florida better than the coaches. I like them at 9. I don't like Wisconsin in the second 5. I like Wisconsin much deeper. They've lost to Marquette. They've lost to Florida. They haven't really beat anybody, and the schedule was light. And I think Wisconsin deserves to be in the top 15, but I don't think they're an elite team yet. I like their talent. They just don't seem to have it all together yet. Doesn't mean they can't get it together. Doesn't mean they won't be great here at the end. But right now, I think I would have them in the third 5.
Interesting. Okay. Well, the voters still have the defending champs in the top 10. That was interesting. We have one number that did come out against the ESPN numbers, and that is that 302,000 people watched that Kentucky-Louisville match, which is the most regular season views on an ESPN match. But to put things in perspective, Big Ten Network got over 350,000 in one of their matches last year. So it's still one of those things. Everyone's freaking out about ESPN, but BTN has had their numbers high and still dominates the landscape, in my opinion. And then one more for the numbers, right? 16.8 is the new attendance record, but last year in the national championship, it was 18.7. So there's still a number to be grabbed, but that's just regular season, of course. And of course, when the national championship has Nebraska and Wisconsin, you're going to have a lot of fans involved. Mick, let's move on and talk about a couple more of these late teams, 16 through 20. Pepperdine, are they criminally underranked? Is there a reason why BYU is above Pepperdine here?
No, I think Pepperdine has proved themselves. And I tell you who I like with Pepperdine is Emily Helmuth. The 6'2" freshman on the left side literally destroyed Minnesota in that Friday night match. And I tell you, I think Minnesota walked into the locker room saying, we need 4 blockers on this kid because we couldn't touch the ball. She got into the zone. They kept feeding her, and she was great. And I think Pepperdine's for real. I think that WCC, and we'll talk about this later, has a real potential for being a conference you want to watch all the time.
We will talk about BYU in detail. They were able to beat Utah in the Holy War on the road. We'll talk about Pepperdine too. Washington got a big time comeback weekend. They were able to sweep through the Bozeman, Montana tournament they were involved in. Boise State was involved there. They're not quite as highly anticipated as they were last year when they made that run to the tournament. But then the fun starts, right? Marquette and Arkansas are 2 of the most fun teams involved in our top 25. And talking about Marquette, what a weekend, right? You beat Illinois in 5. You take care of Illinois State. Early in the week, you sweep Green Bay. Aubrey Hamilton shined against Illinois with 15 kills and 1 error. Marquette and Arkansas are these 2 teams, with Arkansas upsetting Georgia Tech in 4, holding Bergman to 20 kills. Arkansas's got 2 marquee wins. Marquette has about 4 marquee wins now. Are these 2 teams to make sure that they're solidified in their conference in an at-large spot?
Yeah, I think Marquette has always fallen to Creighton in the Big East. And I think this year Marquette's got a chance to win that. But not only that, they've got a chance to have an RPI that moves right up there, and they can earn their own place in the top 25. And I'm glad the coaches recognized their effort and put them ahead of Creighton at this point.
And Arkansas jumps from 24 to 20. They also sit in front of teams like Creighton and Oregon. And let's review our final 5 here. You have Oregon sitting pat, 20 to 21 was their movement. Creighton, though, what a marathon. Everyone's going to be talking about this match, right? Over 3 hours long. Rice dominates early, and then there's back and forth action, and then Creighton is involved, and a 16 to 14 fifth set. and the Rice Owls jump over their conference foes in Western Kentucky here. What do you think about the rankings down at the bottom? Does Creighton deserve to stay above Rice despite a head-to-head?
No, I have Creighton at 23. I have Rice at 22, and I have UCF at 24. Western Kentucky, to me, has had opportunity here to move themselves up, and they've faltered every time in this first 4 weeks. So I actually have Western Kentucky at 25. Doesn't mean they can't come on. Doesn't mean they might not win their conference. But right now, Rice looks like they're the team to beat.
And Rice without Nicole Lennon. Of course, WKU has Lauren Matthews. We talked to her a few weeks ago, but the superstar down in Texas graduated last season. I personally think that UCF is a 21 because that's a team they've gone and they've beaten Miami, and now they beat Kansas in 3. Omaha is a good win in 5. McKenna Melville is on a one-track mind to be a first-team All-American at the moment. Now she's the career kill leader with over 2,100 in Orlando. So I can't wait to keep tabs. Now, unfortunately, UCF is not in a conference with anyone that is going to be too, how do you say it? Too much of a quality win, right? Moving forward in the AAC. But Rice and Western, they can battle each other. I'm going to have one snub, though. Only receiving 17 votes. So needing about 80 more votes to get into the top 25, or actually points, I should say, is Northwestern. And this is a team that beat beat Pepperdine in a very, very dominant match in Seattle. And then Alexa Russo, who is a 6-foot dominant setter, left-handed, attacking, picks up a triple-double in the win over DePaul. They beat Loyola Chicago in 5. So I've got my eye on Northwestern, a team that clearly can prove themselves in the Big Ten.
They'll have a chance to prove themselves in the Big Ten. You're exactly right. As far as UCF is concerned, the reason I had them down at 24 instead of 21, and you may be well right that they're good enough to be 21, is I want them to schedule a little tougher. I want them to come out and play these big teams and show us they can battle with those top 10 teams. And so I don't know if they have enough quality matches now going forward to move much higher.
Kansas, our 26th team with 71 points, 24 behind UCF. Towson is the 27th team. So keep an eye on the back-to-back.
What's going on there?
They beat Pittsburgh last week in dominant fashion. Yep. So if Towson can stay, they've been to the NCAA tournament 2 years in a row. They usually get stuck playing Penn State because of that regional nonsense. So keep an eye. If they go rough shot through the Colonial, the CAA, they could be someone that stays in the conversation. Now, Mick, before we jump into some of our segments, I want to ask you this. How would you rank the conferences right now?
Boy, I have to say the Big Ten is still number one. My conferences might change a little bit. I might have the WCC as 2 and the ACC as 3, or vice versa. That is just, those two conferences are second and third. I don't know which one's first, but that they're second and third in my mind. The Big 12, because of Texas and Baylor, are 4th in my mind. But with Arkansas coming on, I might have the SEC move to 4th, the Big 12 5th, and Stanford playing so well in the Pac-12, they have a chance to move up. But Washington and Oregon have to beat some people. They have to go out and do something.
Well, we're in conference play now, Mick. So that kind of like, it follows back my question, right? How much can you prove yourself as a conference by playing only your conference now? Who won the scheduling wars is pretty much the answer to then how we can figure out the next 3 months, right?
Pac-12 may be stuck in 6th. They may not be able to get out of this rut unless a couple of teams really start kicking up, but they're going to have to kick it up with each other. So, they're just stuck in the mud, and they'll just be throwing mud at each other here.
We'll wait. I'm going to hold my judgment. I'm going to go and stay right now that the ACC is still better top to bottom than the West Coast Conference. Now, LMU, they had a big win over Long Beach State. We haven't really talked too much about the Big West because they haven't warranted the discussion, but Long Beach State came back, beat LMU in 5 over the weekend. We'll keep tabs. Opening night Friday for the Big West Conference should be a fun one, Mick, on ESPN Plus. Tyler Hildebrand with Callie Schwarzenbach and the Chacones and everyone playing in San Luis Obispo against Cal Poly. Should be a fun one. I'll be on the call at 7 o'clock Pacific time on ESPN Plus. So I'll be able to let you know next week, front and center, how Long Beach State truly looks in person as they take a trip up to the Central Coast.
Well, give Tyler a hard time if he gets up there on those officials and starts chirping on the shoulder, because now he's the head coach and he can stand up there if he wants.
Exactly. So, as we move on from the rankings, I want to introduce some fun talking points moving forward. And one thing that we want to keep a focus on this season is not just talking only about the Pac-12. And we just had a bit of a conversation about it. Let's do our best of the West. This is where every week Mick and I are going to give our 5 best West region teams. Now, this can include the Mountain West Conference, the WCC, the Big West, and the Pac-12, just something where we can kind of give a little bit more due to the teams out in the West that don't quite get the media sensations, maybe because of how poorly run the Pac-12 network is as a whole, but we won't get into that conundrum. In your mind, Nick, there's a fun one for one, right? Because right off the bat, San Diego gets the 4 spot, Stanford's 5. Who's your best team in the West?
Stanford's the best team in the West, but San Diego is right there nipping on their heels and could win in a head-to-head competition on the right day. That they are 2 really, really good teams out on the West Coast, and those are my top 2. Pepperdine comes 3rd for me. I like Pep 3rd. I like Washington 4th, although it could be pretty close, and I have BYU 5th.
Okay, I like that, but a test right away, right? Thursday night, 7 o'clock Pacific time, 10 o'clock on the East Coast on West Coast Network. We'll have San Diego and Pepperdine. You couldn't have written a better story, right?
Yeah, and what they follow up with? I mean, it doesn't get any easier. Pepperdine has got BYU.
Absolutely.
And what if you're in that conference and you got to play the two top teams that have been 1 and 2 all the last 2 or 3 years? Pep's going to really have to show their ability to handle both of these squads.
So that we've got that now. And instead of doing a long matches to watch, I think I just want to kind of have a bit of a who has the biggest risk factor coming up this week, right? Obviously that San Diego Pepperdine will be a fun watch factor. Wednesday night, the risk is all with the Longhorns having to go to Lawrence, facing Kansas on at 9 o'clock Eastern time on ESPNU. But then Friday, some interesting bumps in the road for the ACC because Louisville has to travel down to Miami, take on the Hurricanes, and Pitt hosts North Carolina while Georgia Tech plays Wake Forest. So those are 3 games in the ACC that could decide whether we rank them 2nd or 3rd.
And let me throw this one to you. Could Danny Busboom Kelly be the first female coach to win a national championship in the NC2A women's volleyball tournament?
Or could Mary Wise?
Yeah, maybe, but
I'm just saying there's a couple options out there, but you're right. I would say that Louisville right now, especially after a trip to the Final Four, should be the team that Texas is most worried about. But at the same time, Mick, how hard is it to play a vicious non-conference season and then maybe it loosens up a little bit in conference play? That's tough.
We'll see, because the conference is not going to be easy. They're going to have to get up and they're going to have to work on their depth. And so they're going to have to play some other kids to get them ready.
All right. What are some risk factors that you've got an eye on this weekend? Of course, tough tests in the SEC with Kentucky and Arkansas at home on Saturday. Kentucky against LSU, Arkansas against Ole Miss, Florida at South Carolina. What do you have your eyes on? Maybe we could talk about the Big Ten in a moment.
Boy, it's hard because I think all the matches, the top teams should win, but Arkansas needs to be able to hold their position. They need to win both of these matches this weekend. Pepperdine, to be seriously considered up where I have them, they need to win both of these matches that they play. And that will be hard to beat those 2 teams, but what a great opportunity they have. And we'll see what they've got. So that's pretty good. Big Ten is all strung out. I don't see any match that's going to change any position there. It's they're all trap matches for
I got one big one for you though. Okay. And it's in West Lafayette on Big Ten Network Friday night, 8 o'clock, Minnesota at Purdue. And those 2 teams, they don't ever play the epic 5-setters, so it's one of those where like I've watched a lot of Purdue in my life. I've watched a lot of Minnesota recently. Someone's going to win that easily is my hot take. I don't think we're going to have a classic in Holloway on Friday night. How about Saturday though? Because Michigan and Penn State is a sneaky one, but obviously the marquee matchup on what is it on Nebraska Public Media is what Big10.org says, but something tells me that they'll find a way to televise Ohio State at Nebraska. Who do you give the edge to there?
Well,
we don't know if Nicklin Hames is going to come back. Obviously, Kennedy Orr is more than sufficeable.
I think Orr's fine. I think she has to just prove herself to John Cook, the coach. He really wasn't pleased with her coming in there and not making that dig down the line late in that match. I saw him say something to her in the huddle. She didn't back down. She went right out and played as hard as she'd been playing, if not harder. I think she'll be fine. I think Nebraska wins that match simply because Ohio State either beats you or they lose 3-0. And I don't get the 3-0 thing. So I would have to watch more Ohio State matches to know, but I do give them credit for their schedule this year. I do think 7 ranked teams, they're 4-4, but they played everybody. They've taken on the whole gamut. So we have to ask, what have they learned and how are they going to use it in the Big Ten now? Because they've been out there, they exposed their players to what it takes to win. They're 4-4, playing 7 of the top teams. I mean, you have to just give your hats off to those kids playing on that Ohio State team.
And then one more, Sunday. Should be really fun, right? Because Wisconsin and Minnesota are going to tangle in a night match, 8:00 on Big Ten Network. That one's in Mini. So what a week that is for Hugh McCutcheon's crew. Have to go down to Purdue, play them on Friday, and then come back and play at home on Sunday. I get that right? Yes, I did. Wow, a Friday, Sunday. Yeah. It's going to be a weird travel season for the Big Ten, plus Louisville, Florida State, and a chance for the Seminoles to prove themselves on Sunday as well.
Sure. I think, though, we haven't talked about Minnesota at all. You mentioned it, that they moved Wenis to the right side, but I hope they don't continue to do that because she is now focused on the left side. She needs to stay there. I like the young freshman. I don't know if she's injured, why they didn't play her. I think her name's Julia Hansen.
Oh, a different one. Okay.
She has got a lightning arm. I think Hugh needs to get Booth back in there, the 6'7" freshman in the middle. I honestly didn't know what Minnesota was doing this last week when they had their lineup changed like that. And then Chefmaster absolutely had one of the poorer matches that she's had. She trapped on the left side those hitters all the time.
She is very green. That's what I've noticed from Melanie Schaffmaster. She goes up and she goes down, and it's a roller coaster that Gophers fans just have to follow. I'm going to defend Coach McCutcheon here. I think you're in a position, right? You're pretty firmly rooted in the top 15 per se. You see a loss to Pepperdine, still has them in the top 10. They have some room to maneuver. They've got some situations where you can pull a little bit of Kevin Hambley and test your stuff and, pull this player and start this player and work through some pre-conference hijinks if they want to. And clearly they did. Now you lock in. If Minnesota comes out this weekend and beats Purdue and competes against Wisconsin, even if they don't win, I'd say that they are firmly in a national contender spot. The question is,
they're one of the top 4 teams.
Yeah. The question is how many, and that's what we're going to talk about next week, folks. That's our exciting tease. How many teams can win the national championship? Mick and I are going to go a little bit deeper in that after our first weekend of conference play. I'd like to know who you think, how many teams, tweeted at us at 6 Rotations, can win the national championship after this week. We can't wait to talk about it next week. Cannot wait to find out. We'll have a great interview as well as the McKissick sisters will join us next week. Ellie down in Gainesville, Maddie, who has moved from Atlanta out to LA, the two of them dominating on the two coasts. Can't wait for that interview. Stay tuned for it next week as Mick and I get our conference season rolling. As always, he's Mick Haley. I'm Daniel Gilman, and this is 6 Rotations.